Namaste. My name is Janapati Das, and welcome to this first ever class of the Shri Ishopanishad. I've decided to do parallel to working through the Bhagavad Gita as it is, the Shri Ishopanishad, which is the creme de la creme, the pearl of Vedic wisdom from the Upanishads, the Vedic Upanishads. This is Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's book with his purport, and we will be reading through that, but we will be simultaneously reading the mantras and reading his purport, and also the purport by His Divine Grace Jagadguru Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, my dear spiritual master, entitled The 18 Pearls of Vedic Wisdom. So this is very wonderful. We can get both my spiritual master and our spiritual grandfather purport on these. I've decided to just work through this because there are 18 mantras in this. It's a little shorter, and I kind of wanted to do that, but I figure going through the Bhagavad Gita as it is going to take a while to get there, and hopefully I'll still be on this planet by the time I get through the Bhagavad Gita. So we'll be still doing those classes, and we'll be doing some classes on the Shri Ishopanishad. So I'd like to offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual grandfather and my spiritual master, and to pray for their mercy and love and compassion upon me, and for a little bit of vision to inside the Shri Ishopanishad, to be able to clearly delineate the information that is within its pages. So I think you'll be very pleased to be able to hear these wonderful purports and the wonderful mantras from this awesome literature, Vedic literature. So as always, we will chant Krishna's names, which is also the crown jewel of spiritual knowledge, chanting of Krishna's names. Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Gaura Karuna Swarupaya Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Gaura Karuna Swarupaya Radha Krishna Pristayate Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Dinamine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Dinamine Bhaja Shri Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Haribo. So the Shri Ishopanishad, this is, once again here, it's a picture of Mahavishnu on the front of this, and of course the 18 pearls of Vedic wisdom. She's got Krishna. So we're going to read through that. And the first, what's entitled Invocation, it's not actually the mantra, but it's an invocation, kind of an introduction. Interestingly enough, voice, vocate, you know, Shri Bhagavan Vokacha, you know. Sometimes it said the Bhagavad Gita, where's my brain today? The Supreme Personality of Godhead said. So voice, this is where voices come from. So invocation of the Shri Ishopanishad. Om Puranamada Puranamidam Puranat Puranam Udachate Puranasha Puranamadaya Puranameva Vashishashte Yate. Om, the complete whole. Puranam, perfectly complete. Ada, that. Puranam, perfectly complete. Idam, this phenomenal world. Puranat, from the all-perfect. Puranam, complete unit. Udad Shate, produced. Puranasha, of the complete whole. Puranam, completely all. Adaya, having been taken away. Puranam, the complete balance. Eva, even. Avashishate, yate, is remaining. So a lot of very interesting words. You know, Om is the complete whole, but Om is also the seed sound, the vibrational sound representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So many times in, you know, whether it's the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam or this invocation, in many other cases, this word Om is vibrated. Om Hari Om. We oftentimes will say Om Hari Om because the concept of Om indicates it, you know, from a sound has to have a source from where that sound came from. So, but oftentimes in impersonal and monist thought, this idea of Om is just this, you know, is sort of an impersonal concept. So we vibrate Om Hari Om, and Hari indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the personal feature of the Supreme. And from that personal person comes the sound, right? And so from this sound, Omkara, as is more commonly known, Omkara is the from which all things are created as well. So, but here we have so many words like Puranam, which refer to complete, nothing incomplete. So the personality of Godhead, here's the translation, is perfect and complete. And because he is completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as a complete whole. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete by itself. And because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. So similarly, 1 minus 1 in math concept is 0, but in the spiritual concept, 1 minus 1 is still 1. So that we've discussed this idea of fragmented parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of God, which we discussed in the Bhagavad Gita, this idea of fragmented. When you have fragments, usually in a material sense, if you break apart the whole into fragments, that means it's less and less of the original whole. But in the spiritual sense, we're dealing with a spiritual sense. Any fragmented part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Jivatmas, does not lessen the idea of the original complete whole of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is what differentiation between the impersonal thought or Mayavadi thought, which we're going to get a lot into this idea of what's the difference between personal and impersonal, and Mayavadi and Vaishnava, So this idea is thought in the Mayavadi concept that God, the living entity, is actually the supreme whole, but God had fragmented himself into smaller pieces and forgot his original origin to basically try to enjoy in the material world. There's a lot of very interesting philosophy of this Mayavadi concept, because it's problematic. If you're the Supreme Personality of God, if you're the Supreme and you are the Supreme Enjoyer, why would you come to a place where there's death, suffering, old age, disease, unhappiness, to try to enjoy, and then yet find yourself in a suffering condition and have to be able to get back somehow? So it's gonna be discussed, and the Shri Ishopanishad clearly indicates the personality of Godhead as being a person, not as just being some impersonal force. And this is why Bhaktivedanta and my Srila Prabhupada also translated the personality of Godhead is complete and whole. It is perfectly incomplete, because when we talk about Om, the complete whole, you can't have the sound without having the Supreme Personality or the source of the sound. So this has been discussed. So, and there's a lot of very interesting things. So what emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, including this material world, is also perfectly complete in what it needs to do. So this has been very interesting. Why is the world not perfect? This kind of argument, why can't the world be perfect? Why can't we have a perfect world where everybody is happy and satisfied and by the arrangement of God? Because supposedly the argument goes that if God were loving and compassionate God, why would he create a world where people are suffering and not having unhappiness? And to refute this argument is this verse, which indicates basically that this world is perfectly built to frustrate the living entity into showing him that this is not his home. This is not the place where he needs to be. That he cannot be the supreme. You cannot have a billion, trillion, infinite number of living entities who are the supreme enjoyer, because that is problematic philosophically. That doesn't make any sense. There can only be one supreme, and from him emanates perfectly complete in themselves living entities, material worlds, and everything like that. So all the units that are coming remains, Krishna remains a complete balance. The Jivatmas are the same energy, but individual spirit souls, Achinta Beta Veda Tattva, simultaneously one but different. So the purport by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and then we'll read our Siddhaswarapananda Paramahamsa's purport. The complete whole, or the supreme absolute truth, is the complete personality of Godhead. Impersonal Brahman forms in an incomplete realization of the absolute complete. Impersonal Brahman forms an incomplete realization of the absolute complete, and so does the conception of Paramatman, the super soul. the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Satchidananda Vigraha. So eternal, full of bliss, eternal, joyful, and full of bliss, full of intelligence and knowledge, and a spiritual form. Vigraha, that's spiritual form. So personal Brahman realization is the realization of his Sat, or eternity aspects. And Paramatma, super soul realization, is the realization of his Sat and Chit, eternity and knowledge aspects. So we've gone through this before, where there are three realizations of three God realizations. Brahman realization, the impersonal feature, as we talked about here, the Paramatma, or the expansion of the Lord in the heart realization, and the Bhagavan realization, which is the supreme realization of his personality. So this is a full, complete realization. Satchidananda Vigraha, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. But realization of the personality of Godhead is realization of all the transcendental features, Sat, Chit, Ananda, and Ananda, or bliss. In the personal conception, this is realized in complete form, Vigraha. And so the complete whole is not formless. If he is formless, or if he is less than his creation and any other thing, he cannot be complete. The complete whole must have everything, both within our experience and beyond our experience, otherwise he cannot be complete. So this is a very clear idea of why the differences between religious thoughts. A lot of times people will say, well, there's contradictions in different religions. It's because they are all touching upon a certain aspect of God realization. And a lot of the religious paths is a Brahman realization. Ultimately, they think of God as this impersonal force. There is no actual form of God, even though it says differently in the Bible many times. But the followers of Christianity, for example, or maybe Judeo-Christianity, Islamic, see God as sort of an impersonal voice and form, and they shun the idea that God can actually have a form. And so in order to have some sort of relation, Christianity oftentimes will embrace Jesus Christ as the God figure, or Godhead, or and the nuns will think of Christ as their beloved, and this is an incorrect conclusion of Lord Jesus Christ. The complete whole personality of Godhead has immense potencies, and all of them are as complete as he is. Therefore, this phenomenal or material world is also complete in itself. The 24 elements of which this material universe is a temporary manifestation are completely adjusted to produce complete things necessary for the maintenance and subsistence of this universe. So this idea of Lord Kapila, who is in the Srimad Bhagavatam teaching his mother Devahuti about this idea of Shankha Yoga, right? The difference between spirit and matter, and who is the controller of both. So this is what is being discussed here. The universe has its own time fixed by the energy of the complete whole, and when that time is complete, this temporary manifestation will be annihilated by the complete arrangement of the complete. There is complete facility for the small complete units, namely the living beings, to realize the complete, and all forms of incompleteness are experienced only on account of incomplete knowledge of the complete. I love this. This is like basic geometry. It's like different units, right? You have incompleteness, and you don't know the complete because you don't have complete knowledge, and you can have complete knowledge by the realization of the Supreme, who is also in his form. We were said back here, Satchidananda Vigraha, the eternal form, the realization of eternal form and its blissful form and its knowledge. The knowledge and complete knowledge comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of its own completeness. So it's a wonderful thing. So the knowledge comes from the complete. And that would make sense. Like if you have a complete philosophy that explains everything, then of course it would come from it. It's sort of a duh factor. The problem is you have incomplete knowledge coming from the material world in different fields of thought, because they themselves are not complete knowledge. They're more speculative knowledge, like, well, it could be this, it might be that, it could be that, and this is what we think because we've weighed these kind of things. And so this is a different kind of knowledge. The human form of life is complete manifestation of the consciousness of the living being, which is obtained after evolving through 8,400,000 species of life in the cycle of birth and death. If a human being does not realize his completeness within the complete in this life of full consciousness, he loses the chance of realizing his completeness and is put again into the cycle of evolution by the law of material nature. So, in the human form of life, we have the capability to inquire and get out of the material nature through our ability to contemplate the absolute truth. But what happens in this form is oftentimes a waste of human form by using incomplete knowledge to try to find happiness in the material world, and which is incomplete in itself also, and will not completely satisfy. And so therefore the complete apex of evolution, spiritual evolution, to the human form of life, where we have this capability to do this, is completely wasted. And then we have to suffer the karmic reactions and most likely devolve into a lower human form of life again. So this happens again and again. This is called samsara. The material transmigration of the soul through different 8,400,000 species of life in the universes. If the human, so it says here, if the human form being does not realize his completeness within the complete in this life of full consciousness, he loses the chance of realizing his completeness and is put again into the cycle of evolution by the law of material nature. So there is these laws, and we are entangled in them. If we do not take the spiritual law, the complete spiritual law, and apply it in our life in this form, we will be subjected to the Maya Devi, the whips of Maya Devi, who will put us through again into the material nature. Because we do not know that there is a complete arrangement in nature for our maintenance, we make efforts to utilize the resources of nature to create a so-called complete life of sense enjoyment. Lord Jesus Christ said, do not build your house on the sand at low tide, right? Because things we try to situate, we want to keep things in a situated situation in this material world, but the world is a world full of change. Even our body, the atoms and the molecules are constantly moving in and out. Things are changing. The seasons are changing. The sun goes up, the sun goes down. Things change. Our body ages. There's always change, and we never, and even in the material sense, we get married, we get divorced, we have children, the children grow up, they grow out, go out. We always try to find somewhere where we could just, it's like putting our head above water, like, oh, let's just have a moment where there isn't change. But actually, this complete life of sense enjoyment, we try to utilize the resources of nature to create a so-called complete life of sense enjoyment, instead of using what Krishna has given to us in this material world to offer back to Krishna in love and devotion, to help, as we've been instructed by our spiritual masters, by the lovers of Krishna and by Krishna himself and Lord Chaitanya, to engage in karma yoga, or which we've talked about in the Bhagavad Gita. This misleading life of sense enjoyment is called illusion, because the living entity cannot enjoy the life of the senses without being dovetailed with the complete whole. So from which it comes, the complete whole, we must return it, even though it already belongs to Krishna. He's so kind that he gives us the opportunity to dovetail the things in our possession, which we will get into Mantra 1, talking about animate and inanimate objects being owned and controlled by the Supreme Lord. So that's a very wonderful thing. It's a misleading life. It's called illusion. It's called illusion because a lot of times, not because it's not real, but because there is an unreal aspect of permanence that we somehow seek, which is a real, actual desire. We want permanence, and the only permanence is to basically dovetail our will to the complete whole. We must understand that in this material world, it is a world of impermanence. It will constantly change. It will never, ever be still. It will never be consistent. It will never be, what's the word I'm thinking? Complete, I guess you could say, you know. And so this is an illusion. The illusion is that we can somehow find our happiness and our completeness and our satisfaction and our groundedness, like our putting our house down, in this material world, which is constantly changing. It's sort of like it's another one of those duh factors, because if you really think about it and you really observe it, you know that your body is heading towards death. But somehow or another in people's minds, they think, well, I'm not going to die, or I'm going to die somewhere way down the line. And by that time, I will completely be satisfied and happy. And even if you did get all those things that you really wanted in your life, you would have to give them up, all of them, at the time of death. All the relationships that you form in this world, all the money and successes that you so-called have, and for what end? You know, I'm constantly reading about people, the things that people do, that they dedicate their life to with the hopes of having satisfaction and happiness. Some crazy stuff. For example, the hand of the body is a complete unit. As long as it is attached to the complete body. When the hand is detached from the body, it may appear like a hand, but it actually has none of the potency of the hand. Similarly, the living beings are parts and parcels of the complete whole, and as long as the parts and parcels are detached from the complete whole, the illusory representation of completeness is not enough to bring the desired result. From the completeness of human life can only be realized The completeness of human life can only be realized when the human form of life is engaged in the service of the complete whole. It's so straightforward, it's so clear, so wonderful, just absolutely clear, crystal clear. Any service in this world, whether it's social, political, communal, international, or even interplanetary, will remain incomplete unless and until it is dovetailed with the complete whole. And when everything is dovetailed with the complete whole, the attached parts and parcels also become complete in themselves. And so that summarizes that invocation. And we are going to continue with the 18 Pearls of Vedic Wisdom. Same invocation, but different purport. This is by my spiritual master, Jagat Guru Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, you will find a concise refutation of all pantheistic and personalist philosophies. So we touched on that a little bit, but he's going to go into it deeper. Pantheism and impersonalism are based on the idea that because all perceivable energy is emanated from God, God is now lacking. In support of this conclusion, they compare God to a flower or piece of paper. If you pull out the petals off a flower and throw them all over the place, then there is no more flower. It is now spread everywhere. Similarly, if you take a piece of paper and tear it into tiny pieces and spread those pieces everywhere, then the original piece of paper no longer exists. So this is kind of discussing the idea of monism, that all living entities are fragmented parts of the supreme one whole, but God is not complete because he is in illusion in the material world as a fragmented part. It has been transferred into a fragmented state. In other words, the impersonalists and the pantheists are thinking that God has diffused himself by spreading his energy or potency everywhere. Their logic, their example, and their conclusion are extremely faulty, however, because God is not subject to the limitations of matter. So, God is the supreme spiritual, and all matter, all material energy emanates from him, but he is not subjected to the control of his inferior energies. In the material world, if you have some object, a flower, a paper, or whatever it may be, and you expand it everywhere, then that object is no longer present in the particular place, and it no longer exists in its original form. It's now everywhere and thus formless. Pantheistic philosophy and impersonal philosophy is based on the materially influenced idea that because everything is emanating from God or coming from God, that God therefore has become everything, and everything is God. They believe and teach that the absolute truth is not distinct from or separate from his energies in any way. Rather, since God has become everything, therefore he no longer exists separately or apart from his creation. This is faulty logic. It's akin to saying that since the sun's rays are everywhere, that therefore there is no sun globe, which of course is an absurdity. The sun exists separately from the sun rays or sunshine. Even though the energy or rays of the sun are diffused everywhere, the sun itself continues to exist in its original form. We can see that. The sun is the energetic or energy source, and the sunshine is merely the energy that springs from that source. Similarly, although the absolute truth has expanded his energies, he continues to exist as he is in his original form. And this is why we have the three forms, God realization, and Brahman, which is the Brahmajyoti, or the energy which emanates from the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just like the sun rays emanate from the sun globe. It's not a perfect example because we're talking about a material thing, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead is complete and whole, as it was said. He is intact. His energies are emanating from him, yet they are separate from him as well. 1 + 1 is 1. 1 - 1 is 1 in the spiritual world. Here in this invocational verse to the Shri Ishopanishad, the philosophies of pantheism and impersonalism are clearly refuted. It is rightly declared that even though so much energy and so many complete units emanate from the Supreme Person, he remains the complete balance. In other words, he is still complete in himself. He is not diminished or transformed in any way. In the Bhagavad Gita, and just a side point, this is also what oftentimes scientists and philosophers and atheists have a hard time comprehending, because they want to see the proof of God's existence. Show me the proof. Show me where God is. Show me, I can't see God. And the ability to see and comprehend with your material mind, once again, is an energy that is underneath the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's you cannot utilize those things to climb your way to the absolute truth. They can be used as tools. In other words, we use those complete whole within the material world to support our arguments and the absolute truth that's coming out of the Vedas and the Shri Ishopanishad, the Shri Bhagavatam, the Shri Bhagavad Gita, all these different Vedic literatures, but we cannot use them to try to climb our way to the absolute truth because of their inferiorness, their faultiness, and their incompleteness in the sense of the way we utilize it. But they are complete. So they are complete, but they're incomplete when you use them for the wrong purposes. Here in this invocation, okay, so I read that. In the Bhagavad Gita, you'll find the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly stating, "Though the world is in me, I am not in it." In several verses, he clearly establishes the point that although all living entities and all material energies are emanating from him and are therefore not separate from him, he, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is still separate from those energies. He maintains his own personal existence. Again, the example of the sun may be cited. Although the sun rays are shining everywhere, the sun globe is still separate from the sunshine and has its own localized existence in its own section of the sky. Therefore, you cannot say the sun globe is everywhere. However, just as the sunshine is everywhere, God in his impersonal feature is also everywhere. Yet he is still separate from everything. When we say that God is everywhere, we should understand that he is everywhere by his energies, but he is not personally present everywhere. It's not that this microphone is God, or that a brick is God, or that the living entity is God, but rather they are emanations of God. So this was a point I remember one of my god brothers was trying to explain to an impersonalist. I remember, it was in the Philippines or something, and the guy was trying to argue that God is everywhere, and God is, you can find God anywhere, and you can meditate on anything and that will be God, right? And so he was saying, well, my friend was like, so you're saying that this dog shit is is God, right? Or a pornographic magazine is God? It's not. So, but those are the matter, the energy that makes up those things are emanations of God. God could be present in his impersonal form within each atom, but he is not. He is still separate from that. You say that you can say God is everywhere, but you must clearly understand that God is still distinct from his creation. He is outside of his creation, yet his creation is not outside of him. This is a reality that the impersonalists and pantheists cannot grasp. And in reality, that's what, with this guy, he was the same thing. He just couldn't, can't fathom that. God's creation is not outside of him because it's all his energy. This world cannot be outside of God because it is from God, yet he is still apart or distinct from his energy. The Supreme Person has no more become nullified because his energies are everywhere than the sun is nullified by its energies being everywhere. So we know the presence of the sun by the light that we experience on Earth during the daytime, right? Because the light is emanating as an energy from the sun globe. But if we take a plane, or we took a spaceship or whatever, and they've taken these things very close and take a picture, we know that there is that presence of the sun globe there. It is there, but it has energies that emanate and light that emanate from its body. Here in the invocation of the Shri Ishopanishad, it is stated that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. He's not lacking in anything, and everything which emanates from him is complete. For example, you have a mango tree which produces so many mangoes, and in each mango there's a seed, and in each seed there's another mango tree. Everything is perfectly prepared and arranged. It's emanating from him, and it's complete. So we understand the completeness of the material world. There's, everything is complete in how it's supposed to. It's fascinating. The universe and the laws of gravity and the laws of different physics that the Supreme Personality of Godhead maintains and upholds this whole universe, the development of the bodies and the creations by Lord Brahma in this universe are so perfectly incomplete, but they are incomplete when the living entities tries to become the Lord and Master and satisfied themselves within the material world, and their satisfaction will not be complete ever. Therefore, their desire and their drive will be also incomplete, and also eternally seeking out, driving them on to find that completeness, which can only be found in utilizing the material energy for the service of Krishna. So it's just, we're going down the wrong way. We're directing our energies in the wrong direction. One's for ourselves, ourselves as that completeness, the perceived completeness, it's kind of absurd, It was that, so. Pandraka, right? I was thinking of the story in Krishna book where there was the fake Krishna, right? That's like us, but he was dressed up. He was all docked out in all the signs and different clothes that Krishna had, but he looked absurd. He looked crazy. He didn't look beautiful like Krishna, because Krishna is the complete whole. And this Pandraka was this living entity trying to play off as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's how we all look, really, in truth. We're constantly creating havoc and disruption and hatred and massive environmental degradation and war and everything by pretending to be, trying to be the supreme enjoyer in the material world and trying to find that completeness. It creates such havoc. We can have a peaceful world if we understand that the complete whole is not ourselves. We are perfectly complete in ourselves as servants of Krishna, not as the supreme. That's the point. Similarly, if you look at the planet Earth, or the universe for that matter, you'll find that everything is complete. You'll find that everything is intricately interwoven and nothing is lacking. The entire ecological system is balanced. Everything is dependent upon something else, and that in turn is dependent upon something else. For example, you'll find a bird which lives on a certain kind of tick, which lives on a certain kind of animal. These are all existing in nature, and they are all interwoven or interrelated. It's fascinating. It's amazing. It's absurd to say that these things just happen by chance. It's perfectly everything placed in a perfect organization of completeness, of dependency. You know, it's amazing. If you look at the complexion of like even a cell, it's mind-blowing. And for those very intelligent scientists, they understand, they're in awe of like this completeness. But the conclusion is to say that it just happened by happenstance, or a bunch of people just, evolution over a billion, a trillion years or whatever, is absurd, because anybody with any kind of mathematical sense knows that the probability is impossible. It cannot, that this perfectly complete in its whole inner balance of the ecology of the universe, everything is pretty amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. These are all existing in nature, and they are all interwoven or interrelated. You'll find certain entities that live in water, and by doing so purify that water so that other living entities who drink the water can do so without dying. Scientists are still finding out. They're like, wow, we find out that this certain kind of tick and a certain kind of bug does this thing for the ecology, for its what do they call that, ecosystem. And even as humans fuck things up, they find things that'll fix the problems that we do. And the problems that we create are created because of our trying to be the complete whole, by also trying to satisfy our completeness, and this creates an imbalance. It basically throws off all these completeness. It creates all kinds of problems in the material world. Similarly, the forests are purifying the air as they attract clouds which produce rain. The leaves that fall on the ground decompose, producing certain chemicals which attract clouds. So in this way, a plant grows, then drops its leaves or dies and goes back to the ground, making it so that another plant can grow on the strength of the plant body that is returned to the earth, and so on. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful purport by Srila Prabhupada. The entire ecological system, including living entities we may consider very insignificant, is perfectly arranged and is a complete unit. So it's complete in itself. And in the Vedic system, we honor our mother, but there's also 7 different kinds of mothers in the Vedic system. Not just your own mother, but the mother of the wife of the spiritual master, the wife of the king, there was the nurse, the Mother Earth, the cow. What else was there? I think that was it. But I mean, the main point was I wanted to say was that your own mother, right? That's 6, and then I was trying to think of the 7th one. Anyway, the main point was I was saying that Mother Bhumi, the Mother Earth, it's not like, because we're spiritual that we're not ecologists, or we're not environmentalists. We're environmentalists in the highest sense. We understand that Mother Bhumi is the property. She is the handmaiden of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She is a servant, the spiritual servant of Krishna. She belongs to Krishna. Therefore, we as devotees of Krishna offer our respects to Mother Bhumi, because we know that the beauty that has been created can be utilized, as we can use her flowers, we can use the water and the foods that come from her body in the service and in glory of Krishna. And Mother Bhumi is an expansion of Radharani. So we it's like, this can go on. We just celebrated Radharani's appearance day. So what a better way to honor Mother Bhumi and Mother Earth than to walk lightly on her body and to offer her body in the service of Krishna. And this makes her so happy. This is her completeness as being, allowing, her fruits and plants and stuff to be used in the service of Krishna. And everything comes from her body, really. All the materials that make up the things that we use for the service of Krishna. The entire ecological system, including living entities we may consider very insignificantly, is perfectly arranged as a complete unit. Upon examination, it is very clear that this world, which has been produced by God, is perfectly complete. So we never would say that it's not complete, but it is completely designed and organized to frustrate and not be the complete whole for our own enjoyment. That's the conclusion. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself is complete, even though there are so many units coming from him. In other words, in the spiritual world, the law of mundane mathematics does not apply. In the material world, it's true that 1 minus 1 equals 0, and 1 plus 1 equals 2. In the spiritual world, however, 1 minus 1 equals 1, and 1 plus 1 equals 1. There is no taking away. You cannot apply material laws in the spiritual sphere. The pantheist and impersonalist philosophers who identify the individual soul as God and identify the material energy as a kingdom of God or as being God are trying to apply material laws to the spiritual world. They have made the mistake of applying material considerations and material laws to God, which you cannot do. They have experienced that this world is something is spread everywhere, then it's no longer localized. They are thus trying to understand God on the basis of their sense experiences, namely that if something is in one place and it disperses and goes everywhere, then it is no longer in one place. Oh, from what we have seen, if there is a microphone here and we separate that microphone into little parts or pieces and throw it all over the place, it will no longer be here. Similarly, they think that God was once like this, but now he has transformed himself and become everywhere and is therefore no longer complete or no longer personal or localized. God is not subject to such materialistic laws, however. So that goes along with even trying to mentally speculate about the absolute truth. The material energy, the material concepts cannot be applicable to understand the absolute truth. It can be utilized in the service, once again, as we're doing here. We're using material words, we're using material elements, but we're using it in the service of Krishna to delineate the absolute truth as has been taught by our spiritual masters. So the spiritual master, same kind of thing. They come into this world. The material bodies, they have material things that they use. Doesn't mean that just because they're using them, that somehow there's an illusion there, that it's completely illusional. And that's what impersonalists will say. It's once again, it's like, what is the meaning of real renunciation? Is applying things in the service of Krishna. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna wanted to do something and be a renunciate, and Krishna had explained to him what a real renunciate was. They use the material elements, which are complete in themselves, for their service, for that such thing. Similarly, they think that God was once like this, but he now transformed himself and became everywhere and was no longer complete, no longer personal or localized. God is not subjected to such material laws, however. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead expands his energy and spreads himself everywhere, he continues to exist in all his glory in his original localized personal feature. He's still in Vrindavan with the cowherd boys and the devotees of Krishna. He's still expanded into Vaikuntha Loka and all the planets as in the Vishnu Murti forms. He's everywhere in his incarnations in different universes, but he's still present as Krishna. This is the inconceivable conception, inconceivable potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that we can't even completely understand. It blows our brains. We're like, we can't capture it with these little material brains. How can it be true? We just accept. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that is spiritual law. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, although expanded everywhere by his energies, continues to exist in the same place. He is not diminished in any way or had anything subtracted from him. Of course, an example in the material world is never going to be perfect, but you can get an idea of how this is possible by considering a person who has children. The father is here, and by his energy he expands himself and has 10 children. They're running all over the place, but he's still here. The father, the supreme person of the family, still exists. It's not that you can say, oh, Mr. Such and Such is gone now. He split himself up into 10 and he's all over the place. No, he is still existing apart from his creation, apart from his children. Similarly, the sun produces unlimited sunshine, yet the sun itself is never diminished. In the form of its rays, the sun is everywhere, and yet it always remains unchanged in its original place. The pantheist, and that's not a perfect example, of course, obviously, you have to use material analogies to kind of explain things, but you can also see that the sun will eventually die because and has a limit to but the Supreme Personality of Godhead doesn't have a limit because of its spiritual essence. But we use the analogy. That's how we use it. It's not a perfectly complete in the way, but it's perfectly complete to be able to explain. The pantheist and the impersonalist don't appreciate that the fact that the Supreme Person is still existing apart from his creation, just as the Father still exists, even though he has so many children. We can also give an example of a big tycoon who has many, many businesses. This doesn't mean that he's now everywhere. He's still a person apart from these creations and expansions of his businesses. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always complete in all respects, and it is no way dependent upon the material world. It is not as a pantheist and impersonalist conjecture that he has separated himself everywhere and has become the world, and that later on he'll come back together or become one or total again. Their idea is that God has fragmented himself, an idea which is refuted in this verse and also by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, wherein it is stated that spiritual energy cannot be burned by fire, moistened by water, withered by the wind, or cut into pieces. Chapter 2, verse 23. In this verse, Krishna tells us that the living entity, the individual soul, cannot be fragmented into separate sections. Your body cannot be separated into separate sections, but you, the living being inside the body, cannot. Similarly, God, the Supreme Spirit, cannot be separated by Maya or illusion. He cannot be separated and split into many different sections. So that is supported by Scripture. Therefore, they are contradicting Scripture when they say that the living entities are fragmented. Living entities are fragmented portions of God. The idea of the impersonalists is that all of us are actually God, but somehow we got separated by this material energy. Therefore, they're saying that matter, which is why we call them Mayavadi, It means that they are subjected to the power of Maya is more powerful than the power of Supreme. They're here saying that the material energy fragmented God into pieces. In other words, we are God, but we've been cut into pieces and we are now fragmented apart from each other. We're no longer a whole. They theorized that God has been cut into many pieces and thrown everywhere, and in doing so has become incomplete and lessened in some way. So this is what they are saying. They're actually saying that the energy which emanates from God as an inferior energy is somehow superior because it acted upon the superior to fragment it into pieces and to keep it into illusion. But I would argue then, who did that? Who has done that? Who is the source of this impersonal feature? They don't say anybody. They just say that's what it does. Or as they put it, the one has become many. They teach that this incomplete Godhead must somehow merge back together and no longer be fragmented. That the many become one, they say, by beating down the wall of illusion so everything can merge back together. This viewpoint is not supported by the Shri, Ishopanishad, Bhagavad Gita, or other Vedic literature. In fact, actually, when we do have impersonalists who try to translate Bhagavad Gita or things, that they run into problems. They have to do mental gymnastics with words and say that this means that, and they just dig themselves deeper and deeper into the hole. Their arguments are weak. Therefore, to remain pantheist or impersonalist, one must deny the conclusion of Shastra, scripture, and proceed on the strength of their own by their mental speculation, which basically makes them the same as scientists who at least the scientists are trying to mentally speculate without trying to quote at scripture or try to twist scripture around. Well, they do that sometimes, but overall, they just try to use their own mental power. But this is basically what they're doing. Since the pantheist and the impersonalist philosophies deny the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pantheist and the impersonalist has no shelter because there is no shelter other than God, and from their limited perspective, God is this fragmented world. So therefore, they have no shelter. They cannot take shelter of God because they feel like they are God. In other words, for the impersonalist and pantheist, there is no shelter other than this world. Therefore, they continue to try to take shelter of the world, and they continue to worship the world by trying to find union or love within the world and by trying to find happiness in material energy. And this is shown over and over again by bogey yogis, whether it's Satya Sai Baba or Curly Neem Baba, many different what's the guy's name? Osho, there's and just so many different so-called gurus that see themselves as God, or they are able to achieve Nirvikalpa Samadhi by merging into the Brahman effulgence and coming down and thinking that they're all God, but they are still they still need this desire to be loved, so they will open up hospitals or try to do charity work or become politicians, or in many cases they get involved sexually with their followers because they feel like they're God, so therefore they can do whatever they want. And we see this over and over again. You can cite down all these different so-called gurus. The true devotee of Krishna does not do this. He doesn't take shelter in the material world. He takes shelter in Krishna. Try to understand this first invocation. Okay, they therefore continue to try to take shelter of the world, and they continue to worship the world by trying to find union or love within the world, and by trying to find happiness in material energy, which is what we all are subjected to in this material world. Try to understand this first invocation to the Shri Ishopanishad. By doing so, you will understand exactly how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is simultaneously everywhere and yet fully complete, although separate and apart from His creation. So very wonderful invocation purports by our dear spiritual masters. And next time we will start from Mantra 1 and read the purports there. So thank you very much. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Jai Jai Bhaktivedanta Swami.